Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Hey, so my name is Kevin. I run a blog, financialpanther.com, where I talk about financial independence, personal finance, and making more money, side hustling, primarily using the gig economy. And today I want to talk to you about a really important, life-changing financial topic: e-bikes. Yeah, I know, right? Like, what do e-bikes have to do with financial independence? And I promise you, it has a lot to do with financial independence. This picture here, these are all e-bikes I actually own. So I have a massive problem with them. But yeah, so in terms of how I first got into e-bikes, I first discovered them about 4 years ago. I was on a trip with my wife, a work trip in Dallas, and we had a day off to explore. And one thing we like to do when we visit different cities is I like to check out their bike share program and explore that way. And the Dallas bike share program had e-bikes. It was the first time I'd ever seen an e-bike. I didn't know what they were. And so we checked out 2 e-bikes and we rode all over the city on them. We went out to this like big lake at the edge of the city, went through all these like cool neighborhoods, ate lunch in this like hip spot. And when we looked back at how much we had ridden that day, it turned out we had ridden nearly 30 miles that day on those e-bikes. We did it all without getting tired or even breaking a sweat. And I couldn't believe how amazing this was. I've been a bike commuter for years, but this magical device that could get me around without at all getting tired was completely life-changing for me. And when I got home from that trip, I immediately went and bought myself an e-bike. It's been without doubt the best purchase I've ever made. It saved me thousands of dollars every year. It's made me more physically and mentally happy, and it's just given me a more efficient way to get around. And I am confident that's probably the best investment I've ever made too, which is what the topic of today's talk is: how an e-bike can be the best investment you ever make. So you can tell I'm absolutely obsessed with e-bikes. In true like living my principles fashion, I rode here this morning on an e-bike with the Cincinnati Red Bike Share program. $10 for a 24-hour pass, unlimited rides. Way better than getting around on Uber. This is a picture of me riding from some meetup we had on Friday on the e-bike in the evening. And I think that e-bikes are definitely could be the most important transportation invention of this century. And I think that millions of people in the US and many of you here in this room can improve your lives financially, physically, mentally, environmentally, just by this one simple decision to ride an e-bike. So to talk, I guess, for those of you who don't know what e-bikes are or how they work, they're just a regular bike, except they have a motor in it and powered by a battery. So when you pedal, the motor starts up and gives you a little boost when you pedal. You basically feel like a superhuman when you're riding. In addition, most of the e-bikes in the US have throttles, so you can just go without even pedaling if you want. And your typical e-bike should get you about 25 to 50 miles of range on a single charge, depending on temperature and terrain. And you should be able to ride at about 15 to 20 miles per hour very comfortably without really exerting much energy of your own at all. And e-bikes, to me, totally changed the game. So, as I mentioned, I am a bike commuter. I've been a bike commuter for over 10 years. And I've always told people, just bike. That's what you should do. It's the way to do things, the most efficient, best way to get around. But like, from a practical standpoint, I always knew that there's no way I could ever that people would really do this, like a critical mass of people would do this, because the simple fact is people don't want to exert that much energy to get around, is what my experience is. E-bikes totally changed the game on that because they address a lot of those issues that people have. You won't get sweaty when you ride. You won't get tired. You don't need to be in great shape to ride. Terrain, hills, all that, not a problem. And these big distances aren't an issue. E-bikes basically take what could be like a difficult ride for a lot of people and make it really comfortable. And and if you make this decision, it can be really valuable. So this is a party about money, and it's a conference about money. So let's talk about the money part of e-bikes first. So data from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics shows that transportation costs for the average household, transportation costs about over $10,000 a year, close to $11,000 per year. It's the second highest expenditure for most households after housing. And when you think about it, I don't think most people realize how much transportation costs in their budget, because a lot of transportation costs are fairly invisible compared to like housing and food, which are like things you're very clearly paying for. For most of us, transportation is kind of spread out, the costs are irregular, and really the only time you really notice it is when we're at the gas station filling up the gas tank. But it's kind of easy to see how transportation costs so much when we kind of look at the numbers behind it. Your average new car these days, according to Kelley Blue Book, is over $48,000. Average used car is $26,000. And obviously these are averages, and so you'll have a range, but no matter what car you're getting, you're going to be spending thousands of dollars to get it. And a lot of these costs now for the car are so normal that most of us don't even think of that's that much. And of course, outside of just the upfront costs, you've got your recurring car expenses. These are things that we don't really notice at all. Car payments, gas, maintenance, insurance, licenses, parking, and depreciation. All these costs are kind of invisible. We don't really see it. But when you look at how much these cost, if you go to any car calculator, you're going to find that the cost of a car to operate per year is going to be about $7,000 to $10,000 per year. And that the amount you spend might vary, but that only considers also your individual costs. It doesn't consider kind of the negative externalities, which are the costs that all of us bear. Things like pollution, car deaths, worsened health, road maintenance, and inefficient land use. All of this costs us as well. So outside of just the individual costs, you've got the negative externalities as well. And meanwhile, what's the cost of an e-bike? Just like with cars, e-bikes have a range as well. Like an entry-level e-bike is going to cost you $1,000, $2,000. High-end, like luxury e-bikes, like the one on the right here, could cost $5,000 or more. And these costs might seem expensive to you if you're used to thinking of bikes as toys or as like something you use for recreation or fun. But if you think of them as real transportation options, as like actual vehicles, this is a bargain compared to any car you can get. And so if you make this decision, you'll immediately save thousands of dollars per year just in operating costs alone, because e-bikes don't have a lot of recurring costs. There's no insurance, there's no parking, there's no fuel, you don't have to pay for licenses or registration. The maintenance on an e-bike is cheap, and the cost to charge up an e-bike for a year, or to charge up an e-bike is basically nothing. People have done studies on that and looked at how much it costs to charge an e-bike for a year, and it's like $29 for a whole year to charge an e-bike. So I kind of like to tell people that you really can't lose with an e-bike, because if an e-bike costs $1,000, $2,000, $1,500 or whatever, and a car costs $7,000 a year to operate, you could literally buy an e-bike every year, ride it, throw it away, buy a new one, and you could just do that all the time and you'd still come out ahead. And of course, things get really interesting when we look at what you could do with that money that you're not spending to get around. So everyone here probably is familiar with the 4% rule, which says that, if you aren't familiar with it, theoretically it says you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio to cover your expenses and have that last forever. So under the 4% rule, if a car costs $7,000 to $10,000 per year to operate, you could expect that you would need $175,000 to $250,000 in your portfolio to cover the cost of your car. If you're a two-car household, which a lot of people here probably are, you might need $500,000 in your portfolio to cover your car. So that really puts into perspective just how much our cars can take up on our financial independence journey. And next, if we consider the opportunity cost of a car, what is that money worth? If you can take that money that you're not spending on a car and you use it for something more valuable, you invest it and save it, over the course of 30 years, you're looking at $700,000 to potentially over $1 million in future earnings and investments. And when you consider the fact that most of us here probably own cars for longer than that, 50 years or more, that's even more astounding. It could be worth $3 million to $4.3 million in potential earnings. So you probably think, okay, yeah, that sounds all well and good, but come on, like an e-bike can't really replace a car, right? Like you still need it. And this is something that I like to address because there are valid concerns and reasons why you might not be able to use an e-bike. And so I just want to address kind of the most common yes buts that I hear when I tell people about this. So the first one is, yes, but my commute is too far. So I think that if you get around with a car primarily, you kind of can get a distorted sense of how far things really are from you. So this is data from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics as well, which looks at how far people typically travel on day-to-day trips. And over 50% of the trips we take in a day are 3 miles or less. And about 2/3 of those trips are 5 miles or less. It's very rare that people are traveling 25 or 50 miles in a regular day-to-day setting. And 3 to 5 miles is kind of like the sweet spot for e-bike trips because of how fast and efficiently they can cover those distances. A 3-mile trip on an e-bike should take you about 9 to 12 minutes, and a 5-mile trip can take about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how fast you're riding. Just as an example, my son and I, we ride to his daycare every day. It's a 5-mile trip there. We do it in 20 minutes. If we drove that, it would be like 15 minutes with traffic and everything. So the time savings of 5 minutes isn't really worth it for me to have to get in the car, deal with traffic, and find parking and all that stuff. So my challenge to you is to kind of go and look at where you go, where you really travel in a day, grocery store, school, all that, and just see how far they really are. I would bet that for a lot of you, it's not as far as you think. Yes, but I don't want to get sweaty or tired. This is always a thing that people had whenever I told people to use a regular bike. And the fact is, you just won't get sweaty or tired on an e-bike because the motor just gets you going. Even on a hot day, you're not going to be like a climate-controlled car, but your body gets used to it, and with the wind and all that, it's very comfortable. This last summer, I rode 38 miles to a campfire event, and I did it basically wearing these clothes here, and I didn't break a sweat or anything. Yes, but how will I get groceries? So this is a thing that if you're only used to getting groceries using a car, you might say, how can I do it without an SUV or a minivan or whatever? And the key with e-bikes is, well, first off, most of the time, you're probably not getting 100 bags of groceries. Usually you're getting a few bags of groceries. And so the key with e-bikes is to get cargo space. So doing simple things like adding panniers or racks or baskets is a very simple way to carry a couple of bags of groceries. Here I've got a front rack and a rear rack, and this is for a weekend trip. I had all my stuff in there. It can hold a few bags of groceries, no problem. You can also go with a bike trailer if you really need to. It basically gives you a trunk. I did a trip to IKEA on the left there. Yeah, right? I carried this really heavy umbrella stand in it. And then on the right, I had a grocery pickup where I just parked in the pickup spot, and they brought it out to me and loaded up into my vehicle, which was a bike. And if you really want to go big too, this is my most recent obsession is cargo bikes. Electric cargo bikes are insanely practical as car replacement vehicles. You can hold so many groceries in that thing. And I'm going to talk about this more too. And here's another example of a cargo bike, a long tail one, which has a kind of long back. You can put like panniers and lots of stuff on the back as well. But the point is you can carry groceries using things like this. How do I get my kids around? So this is another thing. This is a picture of my son, not a stock photo. So one of the things I had to do when I had my first kid was kind of figure out how I was going to get him around. Because a lot of times if you're a bike commuter, it can feel like a solitary activity, like something you can only do by yourself. Turns out e-bikes, though, are really good at moving kids around because with the motor, you're able to move that extra weight without getting tired or feel like, like you're really stressing yourself out. And kids universally love riding on bikes more than sitting in the backseat of a car, like staring at the seat, And one of the simplest ways to do this is with a bike trailer or with a bike seat, which I had on this one. It just attaches to the rear rack, and you can see my son. I can interact with him. He can see what I'm seeing, and he can enjoy his popsicles. And the great thing is, too, he doesn't make a mess because it's on a bike, so much easier to clean up. If you really want to, bike trailer is another option to move kids around. I use a bike trailer in the winter sometimes when it's like particularly snowy because it's just gives him a spot to be warmer and it works my fat tire bike. I don't prefer bike trailers as much because they're kind of behind me and separate, but it is an option you can use. And then this, again, cargo bike. So amazing. They're so amazing. This one here is called a Bach feet, which is like it's an urban aero style bike. It's called a Bach feet, and it's just like a box bike. And you can see you can hold 4 kids in that technically. You can put all the toys in there, everything. My son always falls asleep in it when we're riding, and this thing can replace like 99% of regular trips you're going to take with the car. And even in the winter or when it's raining, it has a cover that I can put over it so my son can be in there. He doesn't even get cold or wet. The only one getting cold is me because I have to be out in the elements. Which gets me to the next point about what about winter, right? Yeah. That's not me. That's a stock photo. But winter is an issue for a lot of people. So what I can say about winter is that it's not as long or as bad, I think, as most people seem to think it is. Because if you're driving everywhere, you'll never really get used to the weather, and you kind of can get, again, kind of like a sense that the weather's worse than it really is. I live in Minneapolis, so I ride year round. and I consider winter really bad there. Really only 2 or 3 months of the year, not 6 months of the year like some people claim. It's really like 2 or 3 months of the year. And the gear you use for it is just the same gear you'd use for any sort of outdoor winter activity. You put on a coat, you put on snow pants, boots, gloves, a hat. That's really all you need. And when you're going and traveling, you're not going to be out for as long as you think you are. If you're only outside for 15, 20 minutes, it's not that bad. And you can get specialized gear. These like pogies, which go on the handlebars, you stick your hands in them. And I do not understand the science of how these things work, but I can ride in like 20 and 10 degree weather with no gloves, and my hands are not cold at all. So I don't know how they work, but these things are amazing. And another really useful thing is like a ski mask. Here's one I wear. It just goes over my head, covers my face, keep my eyes there. And you can see I rode in this one in 4 degree weather with my son to his daycare. And so it's cold, yes. And the issue that really comes down to winter, I don't think it's so much the temperature as it is the infrastructure, in that cities spend a lot of money to maintain roads for cars in the winter, but they really don't do anything for bikes. And so you can do the things where you just have to ride slower and more carefully. But if riding in winter isn't something you're comfortable with, which I totally get, that's fine. In most places, winter is 2 or 3 months. That still leaves you 9 or 10 months a year that you can ride. And if you want to put your bike away in the winter, just ride in the other 9 or 10 months, I still consider that a win. The final yes, but is it's too dangerous. And this is ultimately the thing that really is going to stop most people from riding. Because I get it. Like, we live in a place that has spent the last 100 years designing our cities and streets for cars to get around as fast as possible. And so from an immediacy standpoint, I would say that most places you can probably find a way to get around on a bike. It might not be the most direct way. It might not be the most efficient way. But with a little creativity and a little thinking, you can probably do it. Google Maps has a bike feature, and that is your friend on that. But when it comes to more long-term things, changes, we have to be out there to advocate for them. Because if we go out there and we're doing things and we're advocating for safer streets, bike infrastructure, better walking, cities have to listen to us eventually. Because the fact is, the way our cities have been designed right now, they were designed because people didn't think about this stuff before. And so there are a lot of cities out there that are doing these things. They're starting to see that the potential of e-bikes. So like a city like Denver, for example, they have an e-bike subsidy program that they started up where they're giving subsidies for e-bikes. And when people did that, people bought e-bikes. And when people bought e-bikes, they found that people rode them more and replaced car trips. As more people are riding these e-bikes, the city of Denver is going to notice this. They're going to make changes. They'll do things. And if we're all out there riding, if one of us is riding, the city won't notice. If every single person in this room is out there on a bike, the city's going to notice. We're going to be blocking traffic. And this is just an example here of an infrastructure project in Minneapolis where this was a dangerous bridge here that was heavily used by bikes and people. And because people demanded it and people saw it, when it came time to rebuild it, they did it. They made it safe. They made a two-way protected path. And so these things aren't going to happen overnight. It'll take years, decades, maybe even a generation before we have safer streets. But if you're waiting around for it to be perfect, you're going to be waiting forever. Oh, sorry. So, I hope I've kind of shown you how powerful and impactful e-bikes can be. One thing I want to make clear, I'm not saying that you have to get rid of your car. I'm not saying that you have to bike everywhere and never drive again. I'm not telling you that you have to bike uphill with your kids in a blizzard with all your groceries. That's not what I'm saying. There are absolutely valid reasons to need a car, to have a car. Myself, I'm not a car-free household. We have one car for a family of 4. What I am saying, though, is that we can be more aware of the decisions we make and of the transportation choices we make. Because a lot of us make those choices without really thinking about it. We drive to places because we were told to do so, because we saw people doing it. That's the adult way to get around. That's the way the cities told us to do it. And the fact is, most of the time, a lot of these trips can be replaced with e-bikes. And if you can make this decision, and a lot of you here, if you can if you can drive a lot less, that's great. And a lot of you here, I think, can go from even going from 2 cars to 1 car in an e-bike. If you can make this decision to do this, you'll save yourself immediately thousands of dollars a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars less you might need in financial independence, and potentially millions of dollars in future earnings and savings. And so one final point before I close out here. I know that some of this sounds crazy. Like whenever I tell people about this, I can sense the skepticism that it's not realistic, it can't really work. I bet some of you here are thinking that same thing. And I just want to say that if you're in this room, clearly you're someone that's willing to think outside the box. And I bet you've dealt with this same skepticism when it comes to something like financial independence. You've probably told people, you've probably told people about it, and people have said, you can't do that. Saving 50, 60, 70% of your income isn't possible. That becoming financially independent in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, can't be done. And I just want to say that yet here you all are, doing things, learning about things that people said wasn't possible. And so I'm not even asking you to save 70% of your income. All I'm asking you to do is to ride an e-bike. And with everything, with everything we know, and everything you learn, everything everyone here is doing, is it really that crazy? Thank you.